Welcome to Extraterrestrial Reality. As I was preparing to do today's podcast, there was some breaking news that came across the screen here, and it was with regard to Christopher Mellon, the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, as we all know, who has an interest in UFOs. He posted some information, an exchange of texts between him and a senior United States government official with regard to efforts to uncover the truth about the crash retrieval program. There was information that this former United States government official had learned with regard to the Kingman, Arizona crash of the early 1950s, and we'll get into all of this. But anyway, I'm going to pull up the Substack post from that Mellon had posted. I'll leave the links for all of this so you can check it out for yourself. He says here, another signal exchange. This is the type of information that has caused some of us to take allegations of recovered off-world materials seriously. So basically what he's trying to say here is that this is why he's interested. This is one of the reasons why people like him are interested in this subject and are pushing for disclosure. It says here, recently, as a result of a FOIA request, the Department of Defense released some signal exchanges I had with Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, former director of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. The release surprised but did not offend me, as I'm a strong supporter of government transparency. However, it also reminded me of another signal message that the public might find of interest that is also pertinent to the alleged recovery of off-world technology. Out of respect for the author's confidentiality, I've been sitting on this message for a number of years. I have also redacted portions of the document to protect the identity of the author. However, I recently obtained the author's written permission to release it. It has now been approved for public release by the Defense Office of Pre-Publication and Security Review, or DOPSR. My purpose in releasing this document in the wake of the government's blanket denials regarding the possession of off-world technology is simply to help others understand why I and some others consider these allegations worthy of investigation. And then he has the exchange that happened circa 2020 between Christopher Mellon and the senior United States government official who is unnamed. It says here, Blank and I are making huge progress getting into the crash retrieval program. He plans to meet with you at some point. The blank would be slack-jawed if they found out what we now know. And then there was a message that Christopher Mellon gave, but it's completely blacked out. Again, this was approved to be released by the government, but unfortunately, as we go through this, you're going to understand it's really still not giving us that end-all proof that there is a government reverse engineering or crash retrieval program. But anyway, continuing here, it says right now we haven't gone that far back. This is the senior government United States official that responding to Christopher Mellon. It says right now we haven't gone that far back. We're dealing with the recovered UAP that landed in Kingman, Arizona in the 1950s. We're vacuuming up information as blank gets read in. We now know the management structure and security control systems and ownership of the crash retrieval program. We also know who recovers landed or crashed UAP underwater authorities. We also know that a still highly classified memo by a Secretary of the United States Air Force in the 1950s is still in effect to maintain the cover-up on UFOs. Well, he just says cover on UFOs, but I just made it clear he meant cover up. And he also says here, we also know the SES-2, who's the Air Force gatekeeper. He's talking about the senior executive service official who's a gatekeeper, basically one of the members of the secret control group. And the name, they provided the name of this person in this back and forth, but the name was redacted. But it was provided to Congress, so Congress knows who this gatekeeper is. Now, I just want to point out, I think it's very interesting, this exchange. Whoever this senior United States government official is, he was learning things. Apparently, though, he never saw anything with his own eyes. He never touched a craft or anything like that. And Mellon makes that clear later on in this article that he put together on Substack. But I do find it interesting. The thing that I really find interesting to me is something that I always suspected, that we're basically this control group, what's ever going on. This is something that's been in place, established by somebody who's probably long dead by now. A memo by a secretary of the United States Air Force in the 1950s. They're still going by some still highly classified memo that was written in the 1950s to maintain the cover-up. That's what this whole cover-up is still ongoing because of papers, memos signed back by officials of the Air Force back in the 1950s. That's absurd, actually, in my mind, if this is all true, which I see no reason why it wouldn't be. But anyway, the guy never did get any access to see anything with his own eyes, this senior government official. But anyway, Mellon then writes about this. He says, as you can see, this senior government official claimed they were being granted access to an alleged United States alien technology recovery and exploitation program. I won't comment on the organization they worked for, but I can confirm the individual had plausible access and was high-ranking, considerably more than whistleblower David Grush. As you can see, this individual claimed to be gaining deep insights into the program and even provided the name of the alleged Air Force gatekeeper for this alleged secret realm. I believe I mentioned the name of the alleged Air Force gatekeeper to Dr. Kirkpatrick of Arrow long ago. I've shared an unredacted copy of this message with some staff and members of the various congressional oversight committees. To the best of my knowledge, none have elected to contact the alleged United States Air Force gatekeeper to check the veracity of this claim. Aware of the government's categorical denials of anything related to extraterrestrial life, I submitted a copy of this brief exchange to the Defense Office of Pre-Publication and Security Review. DOPSR confirmed the text is unclassified and approved it for public release. However, I also recognize that those making the determination that the document is unclassified would not likely be cleared for such an acutely sensitive program if it did exist. Further, the government could hardly deny approval to release this information without to some degree confirming its sensitivity and legitimacy. So, although I'm relieved to have confirmation that the document is unclassified, I also recognize the truth could be more complicated. I think most people receiving information of this kind from a senior government official would naturally take the issue seriously, while still holding reservations about such a wild and sensational claim. And it goes on later on. It says, it is important to stress that regardless of the alleged technology recovery issue, the UAP topic is one that requires serious, continued congressional and executive branch attention. In just the last few years alone, over 1,000 military UAP reports have been recorded. This is in addition to a wider pattern of mysterious and disruptive drone overflights over U.S. bases and warships. Fighter aircraft from Langley Air Force Base recently had to be relocated after weeks of drone overflights at Langley that the Air Force seemed impotent to address. The Air Force still does not know who is operating those craft or where they came from. And it is not just Langley. There have been many similar unsolved cases elsewhere in recent years. These include incidents at Anderson Air Force Base's sensitive facilities on Guam, a large region of the United States containing U.S. ICBM missile silos. Navy vessels off both the east and west coast have been extensively surveilled. United States Air Force training ranges in Arizona have been violated, and more. If we didn't have a culture of trying to shame and humiliate military personnel who see and report unusual things, the military would undoubtedly have many more credible reports to evaluate. With such extraordinary demonstrated vulnerabilities, far more serious than a mere Chinese balloon, there is an urgent need for our government to aggressively investigate incursions of restricted military airspace regardless of the truth of any allegations about recovered off-world technology. I share the message below with some trepidation. I worry about the privacy of the author and the privacy of the United States Air Force individual whose name I've redacted. I worry, too, that some will mistakenly assume this is a smoking gun document and all we have to do now is get the author to step forward. However, it is important to note that this individual now claims that although they became aware of the program, they were ultimately denied access. The author of the message still believes there are recovered materials, but they admit they have not seen or touched a recovered craft. So, unfortunately, this individual would not be able to put this issue to rest, even if they were willing to come forward, which they are not. I wanted to share this with the public simply to help others better understand the kind of information that has caused some of us to take allegations of recovered off-world materials seriously. What would anyone think who received a message like this? Further, this is only one of a number of sources, 4 of whom I successfully introduced to Arrow. However, this individual and another very compelling witness still refuse to meet with Arrow because they do not trust the process. They might, however, be willing to speak with a small group of members of Congress behind closed doors. I will continue to explore that possibility. So I find this this information from Christopher Mellon extremely interesting. Again, it's not a smoking gun like he says, because the person never saw the craft himself, and even if he did, does that even matter? But then again, all of this is academic, as we all know. We all saw the proof recently, right here on this podcast. That's another story. But we all know that there's something here. There's no question about it. And if the government doesn't know that, then we are in gigantic trouble. But yeah, I think this is very interesting, and it's definitely worthy. I'm sure it's going to be a big topic for the next few days. People are going to be talking about this, and maybe there'll be more stuff that Mellon will release as time goes on. But again, this does not provide the end all proof that we are all waiting for from the government. But then again, do we really need it? We already know that there's something here based on Scott Roeder's information, Scott Roeder's investigation, right? We already know. We know that there's some sort of alien presence here, right? And they have technology that exceeds anything that we've got. And plus, there's how many people, tens of thousands to millions probably, that have had encountered UFOs, saw UFOs, and or extraterrestrial, or whatever they are, NHI. Right, so we all know, right? This is all a game. This is all a stupid game, you know. But at the same time, it's very interesting, I gotta say. Okay, and I want to move on now. I want to talk about, now there's a new whistleblower who has stepped up. He was interviewed recently on Twitter during a gathering on Twitter a couple of days ago. This guy is Jason Sands. He's a former Air Force official, also a defense contractor, and it's not off to a good start. I could say that for him. He's getting a lot of. I'd be quite honest. Before I even get into this, I'm going to just say I'm very skeptical right now of this guy, because I just don't know. I'm just not sure what to say. I mean, to me, now there's some people who are thinking, oh, this is it. I mean, this guy is the real deal. He says he saw an alien in the desert out in the mid 1990s when he was with the Air Force. He had encounters. Well, let's go through some of the information here. Anyway, there was this. There's a recap that somebody put together. I'm sure some of you have probably already seen this, but we'll go through it anyhow. He was on Twitter Spaces with some other people asking him questions from the UFO community, as well as some debunkers. It says here, this is a deeper dive into the Jason Sands UFO disclosure, a comprehensive recap. It says here, the Twitter Spaces conversation with Jason Sands offers a fascinating glimpse into the complex world of UFOs, government programs, and alleged non-human intelligence, NHI. This recap delves deeper into the key names and details discussed. It says Jason Sands and his journey, military and intelligence background. It says Sands claims a long career in the Air Force, retiring in 2007 and subsequently working as a Department of Defense contractor involved in software testing, intelligence analysis, and instruction for joint cyberspace planners. Now he provided some information here. He has a certificate of release or discharge from active duty with the Air Force, so he has all of that. So he provided that information, so we know that he was there. He's not, that's not being made up. And he goes on. There's some more information that was culled from this Twitter Spaces conversation with him. It says here, UAP Task Force involvement. In 2021, while working as an instructor, Sands joined the UAP Task Force Forum, contributing his knowledge of black projects to avoid wasting resources on misidentified phenomena. He had an encounter with a non-human intelligent being. Sands recounts a profound experience on the Tonopah test range in the 1990s, where he encountered a non-human entity with pale skin, large dark eyes, and earlobes conforming to his skull. He described telepathic communication and receiving a star map not belonging to our known constellations. This encounter, coupled with his program experience, forms the basis of his conviction about NHI reality. And then he talks about the program that he was involved with and non-human intelligence. He says, program origins and retrievals. Sands believes the program officially started around 1954, sparked by early crash retrievals like the Roswell incident. He claims the program retrieves approximately 1 to 2 crafts every 3 to 5 years, with locations spanning across continents, including Texas, Central and South America, and Vietnam. NHI involvement and agreements. He says Sands suggests NHIs participate in the program under specific controlled conditions. He hints at the existence of agreements between the government and non-human intelligences, citing the alleged meeting between President Eisenhower and NHIs at Holloman Air Force Base. As we all know, everybody's heard that story in the UFO community. And then he also talks about technology and reverse engineering. He describes the retrieved crafts as diverse in propulsion methods, often electromagnetic or anti-gravitational in nature. He mentions the program's challenges with reverse engineering the technology due to compartmentalization and the exotic nature of the materials. And then talks about his motivations and concerns. Sands speculates that NHIs may be cautious about sharing technology due to humanity's potential for weaponization. He also expresses concern about potential hostile intentions from certain NHI groups. Now, this is stuff that we all speculate on. I mean, anybody could have those ideas, right? And then here's some of the concerns and criticisms. Arrow report and whistleblower treatment. Sands criticizes Arrow's recent report for dismissing whistleblower testimonies and focusing on a limited scope, primarily driven by Sean Kirkpatrick's scientific approach rather than a comprehensive investigation. He believes Arrow failed to utilize whistleblowers effectively and potentially did a disservice to their efforts. And he talks about disinformation and conjecture. Sands expresses frustration with inaccurate information and wild speculation within the UFO community, urging researchers and content creators to focus on credible sources and responsible discussion. He believes irresponsible conjecture can harm the disclosure movement and provide ammunition for those seeking to maintain secrecy. I'm so glad he mentioned that, because that's what we need to do here with him, actually. I hope he understands that. Nothing against him. I mean, he could turn out to be the real deal, but I just don't know right now. I could say this, that a lot of the associates I've been speaking with and talking with privately, a lot of people are very skeptical of Jason Sands at this point. And there are some reasons for that, and we'll get into them. Anyway, he goes on here. It says, disclosure and the way forward. Need for public support and congressional action. Sands emphasizes the importance of public support to pressure Congress and overcome resistance from individuals within the government who maintain the cover-up. He encourages citizens to engage with their representatives and advocate for greater transparency and disclosure. Could totally agree with that. Whistleblower support and collaboration. Sands highlights the need for a safe and supportive environment for potential whistleblowers to come forward. He mentions his involvement in establishing the First-Hand Foundation to offer resources and assistance to individuals willing to share their knowledge and experiences. Then he talks about international cooperation. These are all things that were talked about during this Twitter Spaces session that he had. Anyway, it says here, Sands believes collaboration with other nations is essential for progress and encourages open dialogue and knowledge sharing between governments. He sees potential in partnerships with allies like the UK and Australia who may possess their own information and experiences. I'm sure that I'm sure that they all have their little secret control groups, and I'm sure that some of them they're in contact with each other. That's my belief. It doesn't make me right. Then he talks about personal transformation and spiritual implications. He talks about the impact of experiences. Sands' encounter with NHI and his subsequent journey have profoundly affected him, leading to personal growth, increased self-awareness, and a desire to be a better person. He describes a feeling of connection to a larger consciousness and a newfound appreciation for life and human potential. Then he talked about soul searching and humanity's role. Sands reflects on the potential influence of NHIs on humanity's development and encourages introspection and soul searching to understand our purpose and place in the universe. He believes we should strive to become the best versions of ourselves and contribute positively to the world. And then it concludes like this. It says, overall, the conversation with Jason Sands presents a compelling narrative, raising important questions about government, transparency, NHI reality, and humanity's role in the cosmos. While skepticism and further investigation are warranted, Sands' willingness to share his experiences and advocate for disclosure contributes to the ongoing dialogue surrounding UFOs and the potential for a paradigm shift in our understanding of the universe. Well, I could say this. There's been some people out there who are very skeptical. A lot of people in the UFO community are at this point, I would say, very skeptical. There are some people who are believers, it seems, but there's a lot more who are skeptical. And of course, the debunkers are extremely skeptical. Of course, they're going to be skeptical no matter what, right? But here was a comment from Dr. Eric Davis. He has an interest in UFOs, but he doesn't think this guy's telling the truth at all. He says this. Here was something that he said on Twitter. He says, Sands turned out to be either a liar or a believer of his own BS. He was never vetted, and his story keeps changing. People I collaborate with have met him and realized that his claims don't hold water. The only thing that they felt was certain from meeting Sands is that he likely did work at United States Air Force bases. Well, obviously he did. He showed us the proof to that. We know that he was he was discharged honorably from the service, so we know. So that's true. But I guess no, we can't. Nobody could prove whether what he's saying is true. He actually met with a being back in the 1990s. Some tall, described it as a tall white with blue eyes. I don't know. I guess we'll find out as time goes on. I mean, I'm interested to hear more. I mean, I want to hear what else does this guy have to offer? And obviously, we're going to actually get to hear some of that because he's going to be in a new upcoming James Fox documentary called The Program, and he's going to be one of the subject of this documentary, one of the subjects at least. And I would imagine James Fox usually dots all his I's and crosses his T's. You would hope so. And we'll see what comes out of that documentary. In fact, when he was talking with people in this Twitter Spaces conversation, he mentioned that he didn't want to reveal everything that he knows because there's going to be some things that are going to be revealed in this documentary, this upcoming documentary from James Fox. So we have to. I guess this is just a wait and see kind of situation. I mean, all of us are just learning about this guy. A lot of us are skeptical. We need to. I'm not. I don't have an opinion at this point. Is what I'm saying. Where I'm at with it. I'm not going to say this. I don't know. I think Eric Davis. Maybe he knows more than I do. I don't. I can't say this one way or another, but whether he's a liar or a believer of his own BS, like Eric Davis says, I don't know if I can't say that because I don't know him. But he says he knows people that he collaborates with that met him and said that they don't believe him. They say his story doesn't hold water, so he would know more than I know, right, or any of us. So that's a red flag. There were a lot of red flags that popped up. Actually, there was the debunker Stephen Greenstreet from the New York Post. He was asking him questions on April 20th during this event. And here's what he posted on April 21st. He says, new UFO whistleblower Jason Sands completely contradicts himself less than 24 hours after going public. Last night, Sands said he was part of the Pentagon's UFO task force. Today, he says he wasn't. So then he has an exchange here on Twitter of what was went back and forth between Greenstreet and Sands during this discussion. The initial discussion, and Greenstreet says, you were part of the UAP task force? Sands says, yes. Greenstreet says, when were you part of the UAP task force? And then Sands says, from 2021 until Arrow was stood up. And then Greenstreet says, so you served with Brennan McKernan? And Sands says, yeah. But then on April 21st, Sands says, I should have been very clear that I was not employed by the UAP task force. And then Jason Sands actually responded to this message that Greenstreet put out. He says, that was my bad. I should have made the distinction between me being part of the UAP task force forum vice the UAP task force employees. So great you caught that so we can clear that up. Not a contradiction, but just you mincing words as you seem to do. Glad your audience now hacks the correct meaning. There was a lot of misspellings here, so I'm not sure what Jason Sands was meaning by some of these things that he said. But then Greenstreet provided as a reporter, this is why I don't. This is one of the biggest reasons why I don't like Stephen Greenstreet, because reporters aren't supposed to act like this. This is not the way reporters should carry themselves, especially in public. This is how he responds. He says, that was my bad, and then you blame me. Lots of laughs. Classic. I asked you specific questions, which you specifically answered. You later contradicted yourself. Also, how did you get access to a classified task force form if you weren't part of the classified task force? It's just, that's why this guy, this Stephen Greenstreet, what a character. I mean, he just, this isn't reporting. This is theater. This is ugly theater. It's like a theater to a debunker theater. He actually calls himself a debunker. That's what he does. He spends all his time basically debunking UFOs. That's what his life is now. And he's embracing it. You know, he has access to the Pentagon. You know, Susan Goes his bestie, one of his besties, right? And he acts like this in public. This is not a way a real reporter should be acting. Actually, if you're out there, you're working for the New York Post, and this is how you conduct yourself online. This he's an unserious person. I mean, I can understand you. Okay, yeah, this guy said one thing during that conversation, but then he backtracked and said something else. Okay, so he made a mistake, maybe. Don't you give the guy the benefit of a doubt? No, that's not the way Stephen Greenstreet's handling this. He's not giving him the benefit of the doubt whatsoever. So yeah, I don't know. And then Logan, a Twitter user here, Full Stack Logan, he was talking about this. He's the one who set this up, apparently, this conversation. He says, I was told, this is what he wrote on Twitter on yesterday, the 21st. He says, I was told by a credible source that Jason's credentials check out. He's in the Arrow historical report and his connections are solid. Please share cautiously, as this might be Jason since it's secondhand information. Also, he did not participate or have anything to do with 20 and back. He was talking about a program that has to do with intelligence community operating procedures, nothing to do with Corey Good or any of that BS. Some people in the UFO community remember this guy, Corey Good, who was talking about saying that he was part of some sort of crazy program. It would turn out to be false, some kind of a program where you're meeting with aliens and you're going off to other planets or something. It's totally insane. And there was some words that apparently Jason Sands said during this thing that alluded to this, and people got the wrong idea about it, but apparently had nothing to do with this Corey Good or any of that nonsense. But anyway, there was some stuff in the Arrow report, and it's unclear if this is related to this Jason Sands. It says here, one of the things from the Arrow report says here, another interviewee claimed that in the 1990s he overheard electronic communication of a conversation between two military bases where scientists claimed aliens were present during specialized materials testing. The interviewee also reported that on another occasion in the 1990s, he observed an unidentified flying object at a United States military facility. The interviewee described the object as exhibiting a peculiar flight pattern. Now, it's unclear if this is Jason Sands that report was talking about. That report was completely bogus anyway, the conclusions that they reached, the way they reached them. They didn't provide any proof to back up any of the way they came to their conclusions, as we talked about in previous shows. And then there was another part that Logan put up. It says, here's another part of the report where they discuss Jason, allegedly. It says, aliens observing material test, a likely misunderstanding of an authentic non-UAP program activity. Arrow determined this account most likely amounted to a misunderstanding. The conversation likely referenced a test and evaluation unit that had a nickname with alien connotations at the specific installation mentioned. The nature of the test described by the interviewee closely matched the description of a specific materials test conveyed to Arrow investigators. Yeah, that was their Arrow's determination. I don't know. See, again, yeah, all of this stuff is, I mean, I guess I'm, where I'm at with this stuff at this point, where's the people in the government, the people in the whistleblowers? I mean, this guy here, is he legitimate or not? I don't know. I can't tell you that. I have no idea. I'm not sure where I am with this guy at this point. I just don't know if I could believe anything here. But with regard what this guy says, I just don't know. And I think everyone needs to be skeptical at this point. But we'll see how things turn out as time goes on. I'm not ready to just say this guy's an outright liar like Eric Davis is, or anyone else, other people are. And like I said, there are a lot of people in the UFO community should be skeptical. You need to be skeptical because you don't know. There could be some whistleblowers that step forward that really are just not being truthful or making stuff up. And there could be whistleblowers. This guy could turn out to be totally legitimate, but I don't think anyone should be ready to completely discard what he's saying right now. And there are efforts right now to make them look bad. I see that's going on. That seems like to happen every time. Every time a whistleblower steps up, they steps out, comes out of the shadows and reveals themselves. As we know, the same thing happened with David Grush. I do believe David Grush. I believe David Grush is telling the truth. He did an investigation and he provided information to the Inspector General of the intelligence community, and they also met with Congress and testified under oath. So I completely believe him. I don't believe that he would do something like that unless it was absolutely true. So I do believe him. But again, just like with this, or with the stuff with David Grush, or even the stuff that Christopher Mellon was talking about earlier in this show that I went over, it's still not disclosure, not from the government anyway. As we all know, it doesn't really matter. We all know now. I mean, anyone who's been following my podcast knows for a fact that there's something here. There's no doubt. If you had any doubts, you shouldn't anymore. We have scientific evidence to back it up. I know there's some people out there who don't accept it. Go get your own experts, I say. But anyway, moving on, I want to talk about one more thing today. I want to talk about an episode of Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. I watched that last night, actually. I heard about it online, and I heard he was going to be talking about UFOs, and I was concerned that I was going to watch this show and get very upset, thinking that he was going to pretty much tear the UFO community to pieces and make fun of them. But that wasn't the case. Thank God. Basically, it was a comedic overview on UFOs and the cover-up, and he pointed out during the show, he pointed out reasons why people might not like the government, might not trust the government, including pointing out how in 1997 the Air Force, after 50 years, came forward and said that it wasn't just a weather balloon, it was a mogul balloon. As we all know, Roswell, it did involve, anyone who does the research would know for a fact that the Air Force, the government has been lying about this for over 75 years now. So it was something from another world, apparently. That's what it was. That's what crashed there. And there were bodies, too. Anybody who does the research would understand that. Obviously, the writers of this show, the brain trust of this Last Week Tonight, what they tried to do was squeeze into a 20. The show was about 40 minutes long, but it was only the last 25 minutes where they talked about UFOs, where John Oliver talked about UFOs at an extremely fast pace of speech. I mean, he was very well done, but it was an overview, basically trying to cover the UFO cover up for all these years, and for almost 80 years, and it was entertaining, and I think the reason I think it would turn out to be a good thing is because people out there who not interested in this, or maybe have only a small casual interest in it, this might cause them to look a little deeper into this subject, right? And that's what I think. That's what it did. It really wasn't. It didn't really side with debunkers, and it didn't really side with the UFO community. It was really just a fun, comical overview of the whole situation and why there might be something to it, and I thought it was pretty well done for it wasn't we know so much more, right? I mean, people who do not study this on a regular basis, this is what you're going to get when they put something together like this. That's what it is. But I thought it was pretty amusing, and there were some really funny parts about it. Like you said, he talked about how could you trust the Air Force? Well, after they tell you for 50 years, yeah, we lied, it wasn't a weather balloon, it was mogul. Now, it wasn't, obviously it wasn't the mogul actually is weather balloons too, but and the intelligence officials at Roswell in 1947 would not have mistaken rubber balloons for something from potentially outer space. So I don't believe that. But I thought one of the funniest things that happened during the show when he was talking about the Condon report and Edward Condon. He was the person from the University of Colorado who the Air Force went to back in the late 1960s to do a report on whether their UFOs deserve scientific study, and that report, the Condon report, was released in released to the public in January of 1969, and. What was funny about it was that he pulled up a quote that Condon had said in 1967 when he was talking about UFOs before the Air Force went to him, I guess. Around that time when the Air Force was initially seeking him out, he said that there's nothing to it and that UFO authors should be horsewhipped. And I thought that was funny because then later on he says, thought that was funny because then later on he pointed out that the scientific method doesn't go 1, hypothesis, 2, horsewhip anyone who disagrees with you, and 3, conclusion. And then he said, you're actually thinking of a religion, something to that effect. He does, and he also pointed out that Condon doesn't seem like the most objective analyst that you could seek out for something like this. If he thinks that that's actually what Condon said. That was I've read that, that he thought that people who write UFO books should be horsewhipped. I mean, and you're going to have him put together a report like this, a report that, by the way, a lot of the people who worked on it thought that his conclusions were erroneous. It showed that there was there should be scientific investigations into this. There is more than enough evidence at that point in the late 1960s that this deserves continued scientific investigation. But Condon, he was the one who came up with the final conclusion for that report, for the Condon report, and he said that no, it doesn't deserve any more scientific analysis. There was another funny part in the show where he was talking about he showed a clip from this writer, Mark O'Connell, making the statement with regard to why the government would cover this up. And O'Connell said you could cover it up knowing something, or you can cover up not knowing something. Basically, the idea is that, the government could be covering this up because they know something that they don't want to tell the rest of the world or American people, or they're covering up because they just don't know enough. And that's an interesting thing. And O'Connell stated, I think it's just as likely that the Air Force is covering up not knowing something. Yeah, I think that's something I've talked about on this show a lot. Like a lot of people in the UFO community talk about that the Air Force could be just covering this up, or not just the Air Force, but the secret control group, the organization within the Pentagon responsible for this, the gatekeepers. They're keeping this covered up because they don't know enough about these beings, whoever they are, wherever they come from. And then somebody talking with O'Connell asked them why would they do that, and O'Connell says because they can't afford to look incompetent. They can't admit to the public that they don't know what these things are in their sky, and that's I mean, how they would look incompetent. Of course, a lot of us in the UFO community talk about this all the time. Like, one of the reasons they might not want to talk about this is because they what are you going to tell you? They don't know enough about it. And they don't want to look incompetent, and that's one of the issues here. I don't think they should look at things this way. I mean, what are you going to do about it? I mean, you can't do anything about it, but so what? It doesn't mean you keep it a secret from the world because of that reason. I don't think that's the reason. I think it's because of the reverse engineering. That doesn't make me right, but I think it's because of the reverse engineering. And that's the truth of the matter. People out there, some people, they might be frightened. They'll get their undies in a big bunch. If the government tells them there's something out there, but they don't have any control over it, and there's nothing they can do about it, they don't even understand it, that would cause some people to potentially panic. But again, I don't think that's they're keeping this secret for far too long. They need to come clean at some point. And also, I want to point out that Jeremy Corbell actually talked about the John Oliver show today on Twitter. I just want to read what he wrote about. He says, "So cool that John Oliver focused on UFOs last night. I was wondering if they were going to tackle the UAP issue. Their production actually called CDR Fravor," he's talking about David Fravor, "to make sure they were not misrepresenting him. I respect that. Fravor and others had very similar sentiments about the show. Basically that it's the best we can expect from a format like that. I personally thought they did a great job and with some classic humor. It wasn't just a laugh-off of the UFO issue. The crux of the show was informative, albeit narrow in focus with the time they had. It seemed to be acknowledging the reality of the UAP issue while promoting a balanced and destigmatized effort at investigation. That's a great perspective. They highlighted that the Department of Defense lied for 50 years about Roswell being a weather balloon, but then seemed to accept the nonsensical Project Mogul explanation that the DoD gave after 50 years of admittedly lying. They just didn't go deep into all the info to know enough about that event, all the direct and first-hand witnesses, etc. At least John Oliver highlighted that we can't always trust what the Department of Defense says. Trust me this time. I'm telling you the truth this time. I just want to stop there for a second. That's a great point because he did make it sound like the Project Mogul made sense then. That explained the UFO. That's how it made it sound. But then he did go on to say that. But people, how could you trust the government after they just told you that they lied to you for 50 years? because as we all know, again, Roswell happened, right? I covered this extensively recently in a series of podcasts about it, and there's no question about it. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. Anyway, continuing with this, he says, I can see from the segment when they discussed the Green Pyramid night vision footage, how the whole conversation about shape from that one piece of footage off the USS Russell, that it's the easiest and laziest way to miss, dismiss, or ignore the scale and scope of the 2019 UAP event series. 2019 was a huge and important incursion and involved not just classic drones, not even close. But the show went with the government told you so explanation and never mentions that there were 100 plus unknown units swarming at one time, with some observed going into the water, that the public was provided with radar, thermal, and just tons of other footage and witness testimony from that event series, that no landing or launch points were found, no operators determined, and that to this day the Department of Defense has no idea whose technology that was or what the intent was, and that they can't duplicate what was observed and documented with our current level of tech. So that seems important. Folks involved are just reporting the facts and observations as they know them, urging that it behooves us to find out more. The 2019 event series is an extremely important modern UAP case, and I disagree with showing the Department of Defense position and not asking any other questions and ignoring almost all the existing corroborative multi-platform data. Yeah, I just want to point out there was the pyramid-shaped UFOs over the Russell. They're talking about that during the show, and then they showed how they showed a Pentagon officials explaining to Congress that it was aircraft. Just like Mick West said, right? Remember, Mick West was telling you that it was something prosaic, but really, he really wasn't. He has no proof of that. He just, again, it's just, he's just saying that. But the Air Force or the Pentagon adopted that, and then they presented that to Congress. And now, during that show, with John Oliver's show, they basically presented that information like, oh, that explains it. No, that doesn't. Anyway, continuing here, he says, but hey, it's hard to cover the bases in 30 minutes with this topic, and they did a great job with the time they had. And it's good for folks to discuss this stuff in general. That was kind of the point of the episode. It was both thoughtful and funny. It's good for journalists to dive deeper than an inch into a UAP story. Anyway, yeah. It was pretty interesting. Like I said, it was funny. There was a couple things that annoyed me, but for the most part, I thought it was well worth it. I thought it was the best you could have expected from something like this. That's all I could say with it. It was the best you could have expected with something like this. As far as the other things going on here today, the Christopher Mellon, the information that he has now presented, this back and forth discussion he had on a Signal app back in 2020 with some senior United States government official about crash retrieval programs and the Kingman 1950s crash, all of that stuff. Very interesting. Is it the end-all proof that people are waiting for? No, it's not. But it's something. We're in the midst of some kind of slow disclosure, I guess. This is how it's going to go. Or people are just going to keep talking about it until something finally gives. It just seems like there are forces within the government that just do not want to let go, and they're just going to keep holding on as long as they can. I think probably a lot of them are afraid they're going to end up in prison once the truth comes out. But who knows? I guess we'll find out. And then, of course, we have the new whistleblower, Jason Sands. I just think we need to give that some more time. Right now, I'm a little bit skeptical. There are some questions I have about it. I need to hear more. I guess we'll find out as time goes on. I guess we'll find out, too, when we see this documentary from James Fox. I'll be interested to see that. What's going on with this guy? I mean, what's going to be in this documentary that hasn't been shared yet? It will be interesting to see that. You never know. Everybody could make mistakes with somebody. We'll find out if James Fox made a mistake. I don't know if he did, but we will find out. I guess we have to give it time. Every UFO investigator, anybody could make a mistake sometimes. I mean, look at just recently, one of the best UFO researchers of all time, Jacques Vallée. He wrote that book about Trinity, the Trinity UFO crash from 1945, and that turns out to be a hoax. I think he was duped. That was based on the research by Douglas Dean Johnson, who discovered that this story was basically fabricated. That's what it seems like. I've talked about that before. Sometimes UFO researchers, even the best of them, could be fooled by someone. But again, I'm not saying that's the case here with James Fox. I'm just saying it's always a possibility. We need to learn more about this Jason Sands. You're probably going to see people drag his name through the mud as just like they have been doing with David Grush. You're probably going to start seeing a lot more of that as the weeks go on here. And actually, I'll tell you this. At this point, I would say a majority of the UFO community seems very skeptical of this guy. From everything I'm seeing online, a lot of the people I follow on Twitter are skeptical, and they're making statements like this is not a good look. The UFO Joe Murgia. There's a lot of people out there that are just not sure yet, and I think that's the way you have to be. You got to be skeptical at first. You got to give it some time, wait for more information to come out. But it's going to be hard. It's hard for any. If this guy is absolutely truthful and he did actually see an alien in the desert back in the mid '90s, how do you prove this? I mean, the issue here that the whistleblowers have is that none of them seems to have any sort of evidence that they could present to the public or to Congress or anybody to show that what they're saying is true. I mean, where's the documentation? I mean, we need documentation. Where's the pictures? Where's the video? There's other stuff needs to be provided here. We just can't have words. It's just not going to be enough to show that there's a cover-up. Somehow, Congress needs to get to the bottom of this and end this nonsense already. We all know that there's something here. I mean, anyone who's been following my podcast should know by this point. I know some of them have not accepted the proof that I provided a few weeks back. I mean, obviously, there's that Vegas alien incident. There was something to that. There's evidence now that shows that there were beings in that backyard. That's evidence. That should be the end of the game here. This is the end of the story, as far as proof. But that's not a done deal. By the way, I just want to let people know. Things are still going on behind the scenes. We're not done with that yet. It's already out there as far as I'm concerned. But we haven't broken through to the control group yet. Like we don't know all the stuff that they know. What have they been covering up from the American people for all these decades? That's what we need to know. That's what we want to know now. That's the next step. We know that there's something here based on even if we didn't have the end-all evidence like from Scott Roeder, we all knew it for a long time. Those of us who have encountered these craft or beings, right? Those of us who have researched this, the millions of different people throughout the world that have come in contact with these things over the years. There is other evidence. There's been landing trace evidence. There's pictures, film, all kinds of stuff, cattle mutilations. There's so many different things, so many different facets to this phenomenon that the evidence is there. If you a lot of us out there pretend that it's not real, but and meanwhile we have a government telling us that they don't know anything about it, which is bogus. We're living in this stupid lie. It needs to come to a conclusion. And I guess maybe this is there's so much going on right now, today, all the things. You look at, again, you have another whistleblower, Jason Sands. You have Christopher Mellon providing us more information from the senior government official. We're getting there. We're going to get there at some point with regard to the cover-up. We need to bust this cover-up already. That cover-up needs to be busted. It needs to come to an end. That's what needs to happen next. And there needs to be a disclosure from the government to the people. What do you know? At least give us something. What do you know? I mean, if you don't know, then we're in trouble. I mean, that's what that would mean. I mean, obviously, we could look at that evidence, for instance, from the Vegas case and say, look, there was something in that backyard. Those people weren't lying. And here's the scientific evidence that backs them up, right? So, and you're going to tell us you don't know anything about this stuff? That's nonsense. Anyway, I want to say thank you all for joining me. Until next time.